The morning the world forgot him, the sky did not. It was 1943, the cruel heart of World War II. Europe was burning, and the skies above it carried more ghosts than clouds. At a lonely Royal Air Force base in southern England, the roar of engines was the only music left. Every dawn, young men climbed into silver birds with names like Spitfire, Hurricane, and Lancaster, and by dusk, many of those names were painted on wooden boards in the mess hall, followed by a single word, missing. Among those men was Flight Lieutenant Arthur Hale, 23 years old, the son of a coal miner from Yorkshire. To his squadron, the 92nd Ravens, he was Hale the Hawk, not because he was fearless, but because when he flew, he never missed. He was quiet, steady, and his eyes had that calm defiance of someone who understood death and had simply decided not to meet it today. The Ravens weren't born soldiers. They were sons, farmers, postmen, dreamers. War had turned them into something else, steel wrapped in skin. Hale's closest friend was Sergeant Tom Branson, a big-hearted gunner from Devon who used to joke that he missed his cows more than his mother. Then there was Jimmy Cole, just 19, barely old enough to shave, who wrote letters to his little sister every night, sealing each one even when he had no stamps. And Andrew Blake, the engineer, red-haired and soft-spoken, who whistled old folk tunes to steady his nerves before takeoff. They were brothers, not by blood, but by fire. Each morning, Hale would tap the nose of his plane, a Lancaster bomber named Eleanor Grace. "She keeps us safe," he'd whisper, "as long as we keep each other safe." It wasn't superstition. It was survival. The order came one bitter February night, a bombing run over Hamburg, heavy defenses, high risk, no guarantees. Takeoff at 2,200 hours. Return by dawn, if luck was kind. Snow fell softly over the airfield, covering everything in white silence. Tom clapped Hale's shoulder before boarding. "Cold night for dying," he said, trying to sound brave. Hale smirked. "Then we'll just have to live, won't we?" At 21:58, the engines came alive, 4 throaty roars slicing through the night. The bomber trembled like a living thing, eager and afraid. The runway lights blinked green. Then liftoff, and the earth fell away beneath them. Hours later, over Germany, the world turned to fire. Flak burst all around, black blossoms of death against the sky. "Flak ahead!" Jimmy shouted. The bomber rattled as shrapnel tore through the air. "Hold steady!" Hale called, his voice calm but iron hard. Below them, the sleeping city burned with the light of 1,000 sins. "Bombs away!" Tom yelled. The payload dropped, the earth thundered. For a moment, they felt like gods. And then, the searchlights found them. A German night fighter streaked up from the dark, twin engines screaming. Gunfire ripped through the wing. "Starboard two's gone." Blake cried. "Feather it." Hale barked. Tom swung his turret, firing back. "Got him. Got the bastard." But then another burst hit the cockpit. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Blood splattered across the controls. Jimmy Cole slumped forward, his head against the instruments. "Jimmy!" Hale shouted. "Jimmy, talk to me." But there was no answer. For a moment, even the engines seemed to mourn. The intercom hissed in silence. Hale took a deep breath, his jaw locked. "Tom, take over navigation. Blake, keep her level. We're getting him home." They limped through the dark, the bomber shuddering with every mile. Clouds closed around them, heavy and cold. "Fuel's leaking," Blake muttered. "Then we'll glide on courage," Hale said quietly. Tom tried to laugh. "Courage don't burn long, Captain." And then the weather turned, a storm, wild and merciless. Rain slashed against the windshield. Lightning clawed across the horizon. The radio sputtered, died. They were alone, 4 men, 1 dying plane, and 1 friend who would never speak again. At 4 a.m., the black stretch of the English Channel appeared below, salvation within reach. "Almost there," Hale whispered. But fate wasn't done with them. Another night fighter appeared, chasing them through the clouds. Tracers streaked past. "Dive!" Hale yelled. The bomber plunged, the engines howling in agony. Tom fired back, the guns roaring. "I've got him." The turret exploded. And just like that, Tom was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of battle. Hale's eyes burned. "Tom," he whispered, but only the storm answered. Now there were 3. By dawn, Eleanor Grace was barely flying. 1 engine gone, 1 wing shredded, the cockpit bleeding smoke. Blake sat by the radio, trying to reach anyone. "Mayday, Mayday, Raven 1 returning from Hamburg, 3 souls aboard, request emergency landing. Static. Then a faint voice crackled back, Raven 1, we have you. You're clear to land. Just hold on, lads. The runway emerged through fog like a promise. Hale's hands trembled on the controls. Come on, go. Just a little more. The left engine caught fire. The plane screamed as if alive. The wheels hit the ground hard. Sparks flew. The bomber skidded, spun, and stopped inches from the field's edge. Smoke rose into the dawn. Hale unbuckled, pulling Blake out of the wreckage. He turned back once, to the twisted fuselage, where Jimmy and Tom still rested. You're home now, he whispered. A week later, the Ravens barracks were silent. Too many beds empty. Hale sat at his desk, bandaged hands trembling as he wrote by candlelight. To the families of Sergeant Tom Branson and Pilot Officer James Cole, he wrote, Your sons did not die as soldiers. They died as brothers. When our wings burned, they lifted us higher. When the sky turned to fire, they kept it blue. The war may forget their names, but the sky never will. He sealed the letter and placed Tom's flight scarf inside the envelope. Years passed. The war ended. The airfield became a field again, green, quiet, filled with laughter of children who never knew what ghosts lay beneath. A rusted piece of Eleanor Grace still stood on the hill, half buried in grass. And sometimes, when the wind was still, old men swore they could hear the faint hum of engines, distant, eternal, like memory itself. Arthur Hale grew old. He married, had sons, lived quietly. He never talked about the war. But when storms gathered over the valley, he'd look up at the clouds with a strange softness in his eyes. When he died, the IAF sent one last Lancaster to his funeral. It roared over the field, dipped its wings once, and vanished into the clouds. As the sound faded, sunlight broke through the gray, spilling gold across the graves. Someone whispered, the sky remembered his name. And in that moment, it felt true. Because war may take everything, names, faces, laughter, time, but it can never take what the heavens hold. Above the clouds, in the endless quiet, the ravens still fly. The brotherhood endures. And so long as there is sky, they are not gone. They are home.